Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Zoominar. It's barely October, and here we are thinking about what we might want to do during Advent and Christmas, without really knowing at this stage how much we will be able to do in person or how much we're going to have to rely on carrying on doing many of the creative things that we've been doing together. But that's what this morning's all about. It's about sharing creativity, sharing ideas, and learning from each other. Let's open with a word of prayer. Let's pray. Lord, as strange as it may be, we find ourselves thinking about the different ways we can journey through Advent and celebrate the coming of your Son this year. We come to share ideas and to be inspired, to dream dreams. Help us as we set aside this time to share and listen. Inspire us with ideas that we can use in our churches and communities to share once again the message of hope, peace, love and joy that Christmas brings. We thank you for Wendy, who's been able to join us here to share with us the plans that Christian Aid have for Advent. May she be a blessing to us all. Lord, we thank you for this time we've set aside and for all who've been able to join us today. Hear our prayer. Amen. Going to hand over to Muriel just a wee second, who's going to introduce Wendy. It was just a little to say that we're going to have a wee bit of input from Wendy, and then there will be the usual kind of breakout into breakout rooms. Yeah. And I think there'll be about 6 people in each of the breakout rooms, but you'll get more instruction about that later on. But it's just to let you know there'll be time in breakout rooms and then some time in plenary at the end. But Muriel, do you want to maybe introduce Wendy to everyone?
Thanks, Shona. I am delighted that Wendy Lloyd, who works for Christian Aid as part of their worship preparation team, has been able to join us today at really very short notice. She only heard yesterday afternoon. And the reason that I reached out to Wendy was because before I got to the point of thinking about the what I was going to do, I wanted to kind of explore the why a bit, the sort of theology of it all. And I thought, who better to ask than someone who's connected to the World Church, where people very often are celebrating Advent and Christmas in great adversity, both personal and political, and also who has to start her Advent preparation in June usually. So if anyone can help me kind of work out how to get myself in the zone, I thought Wendy would be a good person to ask. So thanks very much, Wendy.
Thank you, Muriel. I actually am sort of trying to get my head into Lent and Easter at the minute, so I'll try not to co-opt this meeting for my purposes, but if anyone has any ideas already on that front, I would welcome them. As Muriel has said, my role within Christian Aid is to coordinate the worship resources for the key moments of the church calendar, so Christmas, obviously Advent, Christmas, Lent, Easter, Harvest, and then Christian Aid Week as well. And I sort of smiled when she said, is Andrew struggling with sound? Can you all hear me okay? Yeah. So I coordinate a team of external people. So I'm tasked to coordinate the worship resources for Christian Aid, but I have the privilege of working with what I call the Worship and Theology Collective, who are a group across the UK and Ireland of folk like yourselves, who are ministers, some Bible scholars, certainly a good number of liturgists. There's a few folk from Church Scotland. I think it's Faith Nurture now from the worship team there as well, who are part of that. So I'm certainly sharing ideas that are not certainly exclusive to myself. I went to that group back in early July and said, help, what are we going to be facing? And not just, that conversation wasn't just specific to Christmas, but more broadly around, I guess, what's been called this hybrid church, online, offline reality that we're all living through, whether temporarily or permanently. And then got a smaller group of them together to talk specifically around Advent and Christmas. And I'm very conscious coming to this conversation that Christian Aid's context is different, quite different in that when I create or curate these resources, I don't know the individuals who will be using them in their various contexts. I have to keep quite a broad spectrum of church in my mind, both theologically and in terms of worship style and so on. And to put that disclaimer onto the front of any of the resources that we offer is take, adapt, use, do what with this what you will to make it work for your context. So I'm aware that what I offer will, if at best, will just be a stimulus for your discussion, as opposed to in any way, shape, or form a formula, but certainly sharing how we approached it. The other thing to say about the context that I've had to operate in, as well as having to think about Advent and Christmas in June and July, I was presented with a case study. So our colleagues who gather the stories from our international partners, which we feature during the key moments of the calendar. So Harvest just at the moment, and just in September, we've focused on a Nicaragua story of coffee farmers becoming coca farmers because of the adversity of climate change in their community. And so for Christmas, I was presented with this story is from Ethiopia. It's a community that are living through the adversity of drought. And for some people that has meant a loss of animals, and for some others that has meant a loss of life because they've been digging to try and find water, and the hole they're digging has collapsed and they've lost their lives. There's that negative story, and then there's also this really hopeful story where Christian Aid's partner has worked with the community to create a pond where the community can now access safe water, both safe to drink and safe for them to access. So that was the story. And I was part of the early discussions within Christian Aid with colleagues across, whether it was campaigns or fundraising or worship resourcing, such as myself, where we had this conversation. We were like, what is the world going to be like in December 2020? What's the reality that churches are going to be grappling with and dealing with? And like many people now, as well as then, we just didn't know. Things obviously were looking like there might be a second wave, but there was no clear, just no clarity. And the conversation at that moment in sort of June, July, sort of beginning to emerge out of strict lockdown, was about how are we going to build back? How are we going to build back better? How are we going to build back with justice? How are we going to reboot the world? And so that theme captured our imagination quite strongly, and thinking, well, how do we move the narrative on from where it has been with Christian Aid? So our narrative from the start of lockdown was to focus on love in action. Love has been demonstrated through communities here locally, through churches, through people doing food parcels, doing all of the things that we've all been involved with, doing all of the pastoral work that you've been involved with, all love in action, and connecting that with the love in action with our partners and communities across the world, and moving the narrative on from love uniting us to loving near and far. And Harvest had focused on that, and Christmas, well, let's make love even more practical. How does love build hope? And what does hope mean this Christmas? What does hope look like? What does hope feel like this Christmas? Which Muriel and I had a brief chat about this yesterday, but the theme that has kept surfacing for me, I guess personally, as I reflect on the world events as well as local events, is that theme of loss, and anticipating a Christmas of loss, as well as hoping for a Christmas that's cozy, that has some still ritual and maybe tradition in it. There will be a loss, a real sense of loss for so many people, and Christmas is a time where that's heightened anyway for people, but all the more. So how do we build hope into this narrative, that's real hope, that's not just tinseled and sentimental? So those were the big questions that we grappled with in June, July, and I took to a smaller group of the Worship and Theology Collective and said, and our starting point for any worship resources has always been, well, where do we go to in the Bible? And obviously with Christmas, you think of the familiar passages, and we had a look at the Advent readings and thought there were some really strong passages in Isaiah that we could work with. And one of the conversations that we were having was whether or not we should redo something that Christian Aid Scotland specifically had done last year. And that was, some of you will be aware, that they took the carol that had been written for Christian Aid by Kathy Galloway, When Out of Poverty is Born, and encouraged churches to sing that on the first Sunday of Advent last year. And that was because last year's Christmas resources, we had focused on the Magnificat, and the stories were from India. They were very strong around women being lifted up from very difficult circumstances in terms of their work, and the words of the Magnificat just resonated so strongly. And Christian Aid Scotland had taken that opportunity to work with When Out of Poverty is Born. I sort of straddle Christian Aid Scotland, Christian Aid UK, so I fit in both territories as such. And I thought that was a lovely idea. Had come a little bit late for me to get it mainstreamed. Thought, why don't we do that big scale this year again? Although very aware that singing, corporate singing in person, is a problem. And that's the big question for Christmas this year for me. What is Christmas going to be like without our 9 lessons and carols, in-person candle-lit service? And yet the power of singing to transform, to lift the heart, to and I guess with that theme of loss, the place of singing even then in how we lament. So we decided, well, if we offer a carol-based resource, then it has to be for virtual use, or maybe people could use it on a doorstep. And you could have, if it's an urban area in a a close street, rather than the standing clap in our hands, we have a carol on our doorstep moment. Just trying to think outside the box a little bit with that. And the other thought I had, as well as incorporating that carol, was thinking, well, are people going to try and do 9 lessons and carols this year? And so I did a little bit of reading, a little bit of research around 9 lessons and carols. And I had a bit of a penny drop moment, which will probably be no news to some of you, if not most of you here. But 9 lessons and carols, as you will know, was made familiar by King's College in Cambridge. And they first used the 9 lessons and carols format in 1918. 1918 was the year of the Spanish flu. 1918 was the year when the First World War ended. 50 to 100 million people lost or would lose their lives to the Spanish flu. And the chaplain, the newly appointed chaplain of King's College in Cambridge, said, as he reflected on this question that we're grappling with, that Christian Aid has grappled with a few months back, he thought, how do we do a more imaginative worship this Christmas? We need a far more imaginative worship for Christmas 1918. And his imaginative worship was to use the 9 lessons and carols service. It had been written by the Bishop of Truro. It had been used in the late 1800s, but it was first used in King's College, Cambridge, which popularised it in 1918. And for him, the emphasis by the Bible readings in particular, because that's the fixture of that service more than the carols, and certainly that's how it was historically, and I'm just quoting him here, the theme of the service is the development of the loving purposes of God seen through the windows and words of the Bible. And I just thought 9 lessons and carols has even more to offer us this year. If nothing else, even if it's not being used as a prompt to ask that question of ourselves, what is the imaginative worship that's needed for Christmas 2020? And that's a question that I don't have a fixed answer for, and I certainly have attempted to answer it for Christian Aid in our resources, but I suppose thinking of a breakout discussion, that might be a question for us to grapple with and sit with and reflect on together. What is the imaginative worship needed for Christmas 2020? So with in terms of Christian Aid's resources, the 9 lessons and carols does feature. That history is in there in the blurb before the suggested structure, and we've not messed around with it because I know it's for some quite a traditional service, or you know, it isn't quite, it's a very traditional service. I think what I find quite ironic about that is for Dean Milner White, who brought it to King's, for him that was a creative, imaginative, and it's become this very fixed traditional service that you don't mess with. So that I think there's something quite interesting in that as well. And certainly in terms of Christian Aid, we've suggested where you might include the singing of When Out of Poverty is Born. And we've imagined this being done virtually on Zoom using the various worship leaders, and even because many carols I expect are now out of copyright because they're so old, then you get around some of the licensing issues of using pre-recorded carols, etc. We've also then created a virtual service around this theme of love builds hope. Sorry, not a virtual service, another online service guide around this theme of love builds hope. And really trying to drill into that question of what does hope look like? What does hope feel like in 2020? And why the When Out of Poverty is Born carol. And we're encouraging that to be sung in the first Sunday of Advent again this year in online services. And why that took particular resonance this year, had particular resonance. This time round, it was less the lyric about from the Magnificat about the lowly being lifted up. Well, that's certainly been a huge theme this year, where we've realized what is of true worth and what is true value when it comes to of our work, and how that's not necessarily reflected in people's pay and how they're regarded in wider society. But the second line of that carol, When Out of Poverty is Born, a dream that will not die. I'm really summarizing Mary's Magnificat as this expression of a dream, expression of hope, of a change of how things have been to how they could be. And that really resonated with the theme of building back better, and the theme of building back with justice, the theme of reimagining how the world could be. And that this moment, for all of its adversity, for all of its loss and longing, there is that hope of how things could be, and that because everything's been thrown up in the air, you know, how do we catch things before they fall and reposition them and realign them? And in that service, we've tried to draw out that dream that will not die. What is the dream that we can together help recreate, and that being the dream of God's will being done on earth as in heaven. And in that service, we've included some little films for download. The Magnificat itself being read by a variety of women theologians, and we've got Paula Gooder doing a sermon that will be available for download around that. And so those are the service offerings and some of the thinking behind the services that we've tried to curate and create. And the other area that we've been working with obviously is Advent. And the research I did around Ethiopia, which is the focus country for us this year, and I'll be honest, for me, the wrestle with this was one, where do I go to with the Bible passages? Sticking to the traditional Christmas passages, but where do we go to really help tap into what's needed for this moment? Phil Maelstrom in Faith Nurture is a lovely phrase in discussion with him about some of this. You know, what are the tools to navigate the now? Where do we go to navigate this moment? And I also, looking at the Ethiopia story, was really taken by their Advent being long. They have a long Advent that goes right into January, because Christmas in the Orthodox Christian tradition in Ethiopia isn't marked until January 7th. And so a long Advent feels really appropriate this year. We are waiting for this to be over. We are waiting. We are crying out, how long, O Lord, how long will we live through this? And so for Advent, we've created a resource around how do we pray with those who are waiting? So praying with those who are waiting for climate justice in terms of Christian Aid's focus. Praying with those who are waiting for a job, who've lost their employment and their income. Praying with those who are waiting to find home because they're so lonely in the loss of community around COVID, etc. So Advent and waiting just felt so obvious and yet so resonant with how we could help navigate this this moment, which feels like a very, very long waiting period. And sorry, I'm going over my time, but just to wrap it up, going back, so I've talked a bit about the builds. Love builds hope, that building back better, that dream that will not die, inspired by Mary's Magnificat. I've talked a bit about that hope. How do we dig deep to find the hope that comes close at Christmas in Emmanuel, God with us? And how do we wait for that hope, and in an active way that's not passive waiting, that's a waiting with, that's being with, being for, and how do we, so the love builds hope. I've done it in a bit of a roundabout way, but to come back to that love, and when we've had this discussion back in July, and we talked about, sorry, the rain on my tin roof hopefully isn't too loud. It's really pelting down. How do we, as Christian Aid, sought to move that love narrative to Christmas? Obviously, for Christmas, love is front and center. Love came down. Love is a vulnerable infant wrapped in swaddling bands in a manger. And you could say that of hope as well. And I was really, really taken by, as well as being with during Advent in the waiting, that, well, this Christmas of all Christmases, to say Emmanuel, God with us, hasn't for me in my life, has never felt, well, it's probably the second time in my life facing Christmas where it has felt more significant than ever. And so I wrote a very short prayer around that theme as an introduction to one of the services, which I'll share with you, and then I'll finish with just picking up on that love theme. If I get the right. So even if we cannot gather in person, Emmanuel, God with us. Even if some Christmas traditions have had to go, Emmanuel, God with us. Even if we might not get to hug family and friends, Emmanuel, God with us. Even if we cannot sing carols beside each other, Emmanuel, God with us. Even if Christmas cheer is harder this year, Emmanuel, God with us. I'll leave the very last thing maybe just as a wrap up at the very end of my bit, if that's okay, Muriel, because I'm conscious of time. But if I can pose the two questions that I suggested, and take and do with them what you will, only use them if they're useful. But for your breakout discussions, is what is, to reiterate the question, what is the imaginative worship needed for Christmas 2020? And I think I'm really cautious about putting the pressure on for everyone to think we have to come up with something. And obviously you'll have ideas already. But what I was really encouraged by was, for Dean Milner White, is he went to something that already existed and repurposed it. So he didn't have to think from scratch. This isn't to put pressure on what I can imagine are already pretty depleted and stretched resources for all that you've had to contend with this year in your ministry. So it may be how we can reimagine something that exists for worship 2020. And then the other question that I've tried to wrestle with for our resources is, how or where do we find hope? Or how or where do we bring hope this Christmas? Where do we find hope this Christmas? Let's stick with that as a starting point, and you can think about how you bring it or where you find it. Where do we find hope this Christmas? Thanks, Jonathan, for posing those two questions. I'm happy to hang around or be put into a group or come back in a certain amount of time, but I'm very happy to, I'm quite curious because I'm sure I'll have a lot to learn from some of your discussions, as it'll inform my thinking as well. I hope that's helpful.
Wendy, thank you so very much for that introduction and for filling us in on what you have been reflecting on and preparing in advance of Christmas this year. I don't know about you, but I was quite stunned at the parallels between where we are at just now and the sort of the rationale behind the Lessons of Carols of 1918. So that's really got my mind already in overdrive. So thank you so much for that. Folks, we're going to go into breakout rooms in just a moment, and obviously I will broadcast the questions that Wendy has asked into the rooms. They'll appear in a blue box at the top of the window and then just slowly disappear. And then I'll ask the next one a little bit later. Could I also ask, we're going to be meeting in these rooms for about 30 minutes, so you're not in a rush. So please don't panic. But it would be really helpful if, while you're thinking on Wendy's questions, to perhaps take some time at the end. Maybe if someone wants just to informally keep time, so that maybe for the last 10 minutes or so, you could also have an opportunity to share some ideas that you have already maybe been thinking about yourselves, and maybe be prepared to come back into the room, into the centre afterwards to share some of your insights to Wendy's questions, as well as maybe being prepared to share at least one idea. So, and hopefully we'll be able to get around to each of the groups to be able to share those things with us. If you look at the time just now, we're about to go into breakout rooms at 10:30, so we'll be finishing at 11, and then we'll have another half hour of time available to us because we've set the webinar to finish at 11:30. Don't worry, it's not a thing where we have to put coins in the meter. It will run on after 11:30 if we keep talking, so don't worry. But for now, I'm going to set yes,
just
Brian.
before you send folk into the breakout rooms,
Yep.
if you are curating some ideas in those last 10 minutes, if you wouldn't mind trying to put the name of the person where that idea originated from, because what we really want to do is try and put together a list. And if there's something incredibly brilliant that someone has thought of, it may well be that others in the forum may want to just make contact with that person for further ideas and further resources. So if somebody is writing kind of ideas down, try and, if with their permission, pop the name of the person down, just so that we can try and curate that as a whole list together.
Thanks very much, Brian. That would be really helpful, because obviously what we'll try and do is we'll try and collate that list, not only to put in the Ministers' Discussion Forum as something to watch, but obviously I'm conscious that some people that are with us are not on the Ministers' Discussion Forum because they're here under the invitation of perhaps supervisors or colleagues. So what we'll do is we will put a link to, hopefully, a little PDF file that will have a list of those ideas, and we'll put that in the YouTube commentary so people will be able to access it out with the Ministers' Discussion Forum as well. But for now, let us go into our breakout rooms, and I hope that it's a really stimulating and creative discussion, and look forward to hearing everything you've got to share with us. Enjoy, and we'll see you on the other side.
Welcome back, everyone. It's nice to see you. Hope that was helpful and interesting and creative in what you were able to share as well. So we had, I'm just trying to find my chat window here, which has disappeared. There, it's there. We had a few questions. We're also encouraging you to think about different creative ideas that you can share with us as well. So we're really just trying to think through some of the groups, and what we would like to do is get some of your thoughts. So we're going to go room by room and ask you for one creative idea, imaginative thing that you think might be needed. We had the questions from Wendy about what is the imaginative worship needed for Christmas, and I think that ties in with that one, as well as thinking about some of the creative ideas. So I don't have a list anymore of who is in what room, because Jonathan doesn't let me see that. He's cruel that way. So we're just going to have to try and remember our numbers, and I'm going to say room 1. Can somebody from room 1 who is maybe curating the ideas unmute themselves and share with us something creative from that group?
That is somebody.
Yeah, that you?
You'll do.
I do. I've written down a list of what we came up with. Chris Tingle in a bag, and then doing the service on Facebook. Recording the nativity, so going around getting different families to record a piece of the nativity and pulling it all together. Did you just want one idea?
Tell you what, stop there, because we don't want you to
Can I give you one more?
Oh, typical Andrea. I go for the third then. Go for it.
we had a pop-up advent. So you went round with different places and you didn't know where you were going to pop up with an advent on an advent day. It was Hannah had the idea of filming and doing an advent calendar, so you could do a pop-up advent. And where are you going to pop up? Anyway, that's it.
Excellent.
It was loads. It was a great group.
Well, that's really helpful because I think the advent calendar thing is going to be an absolute winner in many groups. And I'm sorry, but I've just caught Shuna Dix down in the corner of my screen now with angel wings as well. That's stretching it too far. Right. Group 2, which I was in, but I'm not speaking. Who's going to speak from group 2? One good idea that we had in the group. Karen, well done.
I don't mind sharing my idea. My thoughts were, how do we take this into the community? Because at Christmas time, and particularly in my parish and congregation, we're very community orientated. So how do we get the message out there? And the one tool that I've got for doing that is my building, because we've got a tower and it can be seen across the parish. So I'm thinking Christmas Eve, that would normally be jam-packed with people sitting on the floor, you know, standing in the aisles. I'm thinking of having some kind of sound and light display from the top of the tower that people don't need to come to see, but they can see it from their own garden. Just stand out in your garden and see it, and have some of the carols played that they all love, and also have the kind of the Christmas message in there that everybody comes to share at Christmas time. So it's somewhere that they can engage, but by the same time be safe as well. So that was just and I get a trial run, because we normally have a firework display, and that's a great community event because everybody comes into the church for their burgers after. Can't do that this year, but I'm thinking of trying to do a light display from the tower, and that would give me a trial run to see how it works, and then change the theme and make it very, very Christmassy. So that was one idea.
Awesome. Light show from the church. There we go. Fabulous. My neighbouring minister, I don't know if Louise is on today, but her husband works for an event company. We think we might hire in some equipment, which could be awesome. There you go. Right, group 3. Who was in group 3? I'm looking for the unmuting of someone.
Muriel.
Oh, Muriel. Did I hear from an angel voice?
I was in group 3, but there were other very good people in group 3 who could all speak as well.
They've not.
But anyway, our one great idea comes from Elizabeth, and it's a yarn bomb treasure hunt, which may be called Christmas yarn. And it has a dual purpose in that it keeps the knitting group very focused for the next few weeks, knitting stars. And then there's a kind of treasure hunt element where you go around and find 6 stars of the same color. And when you do that, you will have the whole Christmas story.
Excellent. Excellent. Like that idea. And we look forward to Elizabeth giving us all the patterns for how we do that. Excellent. Group 4. Who's in group 4 and going to unmute themselves? Jonathan, you might need to come up with the list here just so we can...
I think that might have been us, but I'm not sure.
It is now. It is now.
It is now. That's fine. We had quite a few good ideas. I'll follow on to the yarn one, but just using the railings to continue sharing, people's input, whether that's from the church or people adding to the railings. Another fun one we had was doing things in the church windows, such as the Advent candles, and putting up a picture of a candle in the first week, and then a picture of 2 candles in the second week, a picture of 3 candles, especially if you're, very much in the public eye because of where the church building is located. Around us, we're doing something called Follow the Star, which is focusing quite a lot on the wise men, and we're doing that ecumenically, and we're going to have stars in lots of different places, and we're also doing a virtual Christingle, and the stars are going to help us to tell the story and things like that. We'd hoped to have people dressed up on the high street at the weekends, but we're worried about that creating gatherings which wouldn't be allowed. So we've decided to axe that one. But there were quite a few good ideas of different things around the displays that we can put up that people can see, not just virtually, but as they are out for a walk or out and about. Putting prayers and things that people can pick up and take with them in a planter, on a railing, that sort of thing.
Good call. Okay, so that was
room 5.
Thank you.
So
Oh, sorry.
that's all right. No, it's absolutely fine. And room 4 was Eileen Miller's room. If that is any help, if anyone from Eileen's room would like to speak, or perhaps even Eileen herself.
I think I was taking some notes.
Excellent.
From the real room 4.
I'm sure you felt cheated there a moment ago.
I did. I will be having a word with Susie as soon as I can.
Sandy's used to be speaking over him.
Absolutely. Lots of great ideas coming out. We were also talking about using our church building and the kind of idea of light and maybe things in windows. We hadn't got quite as far as Karen and our full Sonny Lumiere, which sounds really impressive. We've thought a bit about music and maybe using instruments. Perhaps even people could make their own, since you're not allowed to blow anything, but you can shake things. That was an idea that was there to join in the idea of making a joyful noise, if for those of us who can gather in churches. But something that really struck me, which is less maybe of a kind of practical idea, is the idea of going back to the ideas of loss that Wendy was speaking about earlier, and taking the idea of Mary and Joseph being away from home and away from family, separated from those who were their support network at the time of the birth of Jesus, and picking up on that idea as something to meditate upon at Christmas, and maybe use that as a way to acknowledge that loss that we're feeling, but also turn it around to face towards hope.
Excellent. Brilliant. I'm very jealous of all of you ministers that have a church with windows that you can show things from, B, church with railings that you can tie things to, and C, a church with any space round it at all that you can do something with. I think Jonathan and I are both in a very similar situation where we literally have the building and the frontage and nothing, no space in front or anything. So I think I'm just going to take over some of the road outside.
Millport's okay. I've got plenty of room around that.
Yeah, well, that's true. Okay, number 6.
Can I just make the point? Can I just make the point? At least you've got a building, and now I'll mute myself.
Well, fair, Elizabeth, you have a blue gazebo, and we don't have one of them. You've got a blue gazebo, but we'll take that. Now, number 6, group 6.
Room 6 was Jenny, Linda, Mary, and Shuna.
Yes.
I don't mind speaking, if any of the others want to chip in.
The Archangel Shuna.
We kind of talked a wee bit about how we could take the message out into the community, and using the community from a point of view of having like a walk that people could do. So, and this could be done in various ways. It could be in a shop windows, it could be posting things on lampposts, it could be staking things in the ground in a community walk, but having the lessons and carols, picking up on that lessons and carols idea, and marking them out so as people walked along, they would be able to follow that round. And you could also, not just necessarily do the lessons and carols. Jane had talked a wee bit about 12 Days of Christmas that they had similarly done, and you could build up a wee kind of almost like a community competition around this, where folk have got to spot where they find the different parts, and hand that in, kind of thing. And from the point of view of the lessons and carols, I had just put together some stuff for Spill the Beans around the lessons and carols for the community. And I hadn't realised the connection with the Spanish flu. So thank you for that. I'll have to go and rewrite the introduction to it to kind of flash back to that. But what I've been able to do is put together for that a community walk. And on each of the sheets, I put a QR code that actually, when you click, you load up the link, it takes you to YouTube and King's College Choir singing a Christmas carol. So I hadn't quite got all of that, so I'm really pleased to hear that, but I'll now need to go and rewrite the introduction. So yeah, so we were talking about taking things out into the community a wee bit.
Sorry, I'm just seeing the chat, and Bruce has suggested the lessons and carols silent disco around the parish. Be awesome, yeah. I can just imagine that in the parish you're in, Bruce. It would be a very, very properly organised silent disco. That's all I'm saying. But no, I think we're looking at the same thing, the walk, and using different shops. You know, for example, the Jewellers for the Gold, the Bath Bomb shop for the Myrrh, and putting a QR code in their window that then takes them to a wee pre-recorded video which tells them a wee bit of the story. And there's so much we can do now with technology and things. So thank you, Shona. Room 7.
Room 7 was the room where Josh Shand and Grace Steele, John Murning, Julie Moody, Karen Hamilton, Margaret Steele. Anyone?
Some very, very creative bods in there. Who's going to unmute themselves first? Obviously, some very gracious people as well, not wanting to put themselves before anyone else. Where's John Murning? Maybe ignoring me.
No, I would never ignore you, Brian.
Thank you, brother.
I'd say lots about you behind your back, but I'd never ignore you. Our group, I'm trying to kind of remember what we did. George had an interesting thing about how we host people this Christmas. You know, saying that, you know, with a lot of the online stuff, suddenly we're being the hosts rather than going into buildings, you know, and like charges where you maybe get 2 or 3 congregations and they're the kind of host, but suddenly we were the host. And we kind of explored that wee theme about different people hosting Christmas, you know, the angels, the shepherds entertaining the angels, the innkeeper entertaining Mary and Joseph, you know, that whole kind of thing. We also explored that whole theme about how do we make inroads into the community, and also shared the concern about, you know, all the people who are not online and we're not reaching within our congregations. That was a concern for us as well. We think that there is hope about there at Christmas, but just how we can portray that within our communities. Some of the ideas that have already been shared, we had explored, you know, different ways of engaging in the community. So, and then we actually got on to Remembrance Day, and we talked about that for 5 minutes.
Okay, we'll come on to Remembrance Day because I do have a little update for you on that, so I might as well just do that at that point in a minute. That's really helpful. I think the hosting thing, that also came up in our group as well. How do we gather people when we can't gather? And Jeff had a good idea about encouraging people within the rules, within the restrictions, to actually intentionally gather for a reason, whether that's to go to a coffee shop for a coffee and actually think about something Christmassy, something. So, yeah, interesting. Number 8, I think we're on now, Group 8, Jonathan.
Yep, Group 8. That was Andrew Sarrell, Fiona Ogg, Keith Blackwood, and Susan Cord.
Oh.
And iPad.
An iPad.
Yeah, sorry.
Who's able to speak for that one? Anyone there? What about Fiona Ogg? Fiona with her mobile mans. There's bound to be some really creative Christmassy things you can do there, Fiona.
I couldn't unmute there for a minute. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yes, we had quite a list actually, including. Can I give you 2 ideas?
On you go.
One.
You.
Thank you. So generous, so kind, Brian. we looked on the Meaningful Chocolate Company. Chocolate, yes, not a problem. But there are lots of different things in there that you could send out or hand in to families around parishes. And some of them have got a little story as well. And that was us taking things to them. And it was also the idea of bringing hope to people as well. So that worked in with it. And the other one was brilliant one. Susan has a blow-up nativity set, about 6 feet high or something. So you could put that in front of your Sonny Lumiere in the church grounds or in the manse grounds with a backdrop as well. IKEA used to do a cardboard covered light bulb that was a star shape. You could hang either that or get somebody in the congregation to make a wire frame of stars and angels and wrap round Christmas lights. So again, you've got that in your windows if you've got plain windows. So yeah, I'll stop.
No, you had me at blow up nativity. Where is Susan Cord? Susan Cord, get yourself unmuted for a wee minute if you wouldn't mind.
I'm here, Brian.
Thank you.
Sorry, Susan.
You need more detail.
It's okay. I suspected that might come up. Let me see if I can find it again.
It was just so good.
I'm going to see, am I able to share screen? I'll find out just now.
Yes.
There you go.
Oh my word.
Because a picture tells 1,000 words, so why talk about it?
So please let us know, was it expensive? Was it difficult to find?
Easy to find. It's available on Amazon, but I don't think it was bought from Amazon. Other online retailers are available. It would have been less than 100 quid. There's no, it was James that bought it.
Okay, right, well.
And we've got an external plug that you plug it into.
Okay.
And it's going to have more next year, or this year, I mean. That's last year's.
It's 116 on Amazon just now.
Thank you very much.
That's not how much we spent, but.
Well, we'll find it, Susan. Thank you very much for sharing your screen there. That's very helpful. Blow up nativity. I don't think there's going to be an idea that tops that one today.
Unless you live in a place where it would blow away.
Well, yeah. Nonsense.
But it doesn't, because you tie it down, it's got guy lines. And it's got weight. It's got massive weights in the bottom. It's like big bean bags in the bottom, so it has to be blowing an absolute hoolie. And we get quite windy right through the Beauly Firth.
Apparently, James can come and fit it in any garden, so it's fine. So that's good. Okay, group number 9.
Group number 9 was Ellen Lassen-Davidson, John McGregor, Lorraine Lafontaine. Margaret,
Ellen has unmuted herself. That's fabulous.
Ellen.
I unmuted myself because I'll drop everybody else in it. But I did notice that Elizabeth Spence put up about the Advent windows, and that's something we're doing in a number of communities around us about creating an Advent window, progressive Advent calendar. But Monica Redmond had a couple of good ideas kind of around caroling, but also kind of about a I think there were a lot of knitted angels being produced, and that they're going to have lots of knitted angels around the community to give out. So there's lots of people that are kind of creating a Advent trail in a sense of having things, trying to build community with knitted things and symbols in windows, but looking at that. And also I think Mark Malcolm, along the lines of the caroling, mentioned caroling in your garden, kind of encouraging congregational folk to go out in the garden and sing alone in their garden, but everybody at the same time singing the same carol in their garden, and maybe the church bells calling everybody to carol in their garden. So those were kind of a couple of wee ideas from our group.
Well, we're all going to Christen to have a listen to that. Let us know when that's happening, Mark. But actually, there was a project a couple of years ago for Remembrance, where they encouraged at the same point every community to have the last post being played at different parts of the. So actually, that would be really nice. Excellent. And then so that was 9, yeah. Jonathan, or was that
Sorry,
8?
I was in Amazon. I was just getting the cursor back. that was room 9. Room 10, the last room, that was Alison McBriar, Donald McCorkindale, Muriel Willoughby, Rachel Wilson.
Okay, who's going to unmute themselves on that one? I'm going to come to Donald in a little minute about something else anyway. Alison, you wanting to share anything? Since I can see you on my screen right in front.
You can see me. Quite a lot of the things that we talked about have already been mentioned. You know, a lot about, you know, going out into the community, doing things that are very visual, using railings, projecting onto buildings was one of the things. It was Joe Kavanagh said that he has a building which is, the outside of which is white and it's pretty prominent. So he's thinking about projecting onto that, which would be very visual. Another thing that was mentioned, I think that what hasn't been mentioned elsewhere was the idea of carols in a car park. And I think Amanda McCordy has done this just recently with people gathering in their cars. So we wondered if people might be able to gather if you have a car park or a field somewhere that people wouldn't get stuck in. People gathering that way. And Donald did mention that he's got a website. I think he's already mentioned that in chat now with various resources. But yeah,
excellent resources there, Alison. Excellent resources, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, so he's put that in chat. I'm not sure if anybody else from Group 10 wants to chip in and mention anything I've forgotten. And I'm overwhelmed by the other ideas.
Brilliant. Well, that's good, because what we are asking is that somebody from each group who took notes sends them to one of us. Shauna's probably the best because she's clever at that type of thing. Sorry, Shauna. But you have an angel wing, so you can't say anything bad about us. So SDix at Church Scotland, if you send the list over, we'll get that all collated and put out, because I think there are going to be some tremendous ideas. One that I'm exploring at the moment is inviting people in the church, each household, to buy from us an Advent candle, one of the 25-day ones, because we can't afford 400 of them. That would be like 1,200 quid. But if folks did it, households did it, and then journeyed with us each day with the Advent calendar online or whatever, then that would be really, really cool. So I think there's just so much that we can do. It's just going to take time. And one thing that we did talk about was the fact that this will take squidillions of hours for each of us. And let's not muck about with that. It is going to take a long, long time. If we are producing videos or an Advent trail, what else, and I will really challenge you here, what else are you not going to do because you're doing this? I think this is where congregations want us to be, to have the best Advent and Christmas that they can. And if we can't tell the story of this, then we might as well shut the doors of the denomination. We need to tell this Christmas story, as Wendy was saying, in a new way. But whatever thing you choose to do, it is going to take time. My plea with you is don't do everything that you're continuing to do at the moment. You know, it's really tempting because we've got so much on. But as I was saying earlier, and I'll go on record and saying this, and this is on YouTube, and that's fine, I'm not the best visitor in the world as a minister. I will visit where it's necessary, where there's a pastoral emergency, but actually in terms of talking about where my skills are, going to have a cup of coffee with someone is probably not the best thing that I do. However, I think we need to realise that there are certain things in this period that we've been able to lay down, and we need to think about what other things we lay down as ministers who bring word and sacrament, who do mission, who do community work. What is it that we need to focus on this year to produce this fantastic Christmas that people are looking for? There has been a little bit about virtual said today, and I want to come to Donald, because you may remember that Donald had at General Assembly had a wee comment about virtual and remote. And Donald, I'm looking at you to maybe come in here. Jonathan, I'm not sure the spotlight's working brilliantly.
Brian.
Yes, Sandy.
I just wonder if I could add, I think what you've said about laying down things is absolutely right. I think we also need to be careful in our creativity this year that we don't create new traditions which are going to become burdensome in future years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's really important. This is a unique year, hopefully. A unique year, a special year. We don't know. And I think before we come to Donald, you're absolutely right, Sandy. We are as well going to be looking at how can we share some of these resources that we're creating that don't need to be contextually specific to your community. So if you're doing something that would transfer and you're doing 25 videos that it doesn't matter about where it's set, let's share them with each other so that we can pick them up and be kind to each other as colleagues. Let's love each other as ministers and be the imaginative group of folks that we've proven ourselves to be over these last few months as well. And Muriel, absolutely, can we keep it real as well as magical? Totally and utterly. This is our story. This is our moment in the pandemic to tell it. Let's do it. Donald, coming to you, virtual. What do you think of the word virtual?
Thank you, Brian. Yes, at the General Assembly, I reminded everyone, and it really was from a comment that started with Neil McLennan, who did wonderful virtual things for us. But he was the one who kept reminding us not to use the word virtual, which sometimes has a sense of non-reality. And we tried to use terms like online or remote access. And just in thinking over things we've spoken about today, so many folk in our community will engage in Christmas, in Advent. They'll call it the how many ever shopping days until Christmas. And for so many folk, the story of Emmanuel, God with us, is something that's not quite real. And we have an opportunity this year, as Muriel was saying there, let's keep it real as well as magical. And we need to keep that reality. This is not virtual. Brian, thanks for the comment about the website. I thought you were going to go on and say there were some great resources because some came from you. There's that wonderful Christmas in chocolate, and I've never seen it done better than the way you do it. But yeah, there are some resources there, and the ITs for ministry, it's for ministry. Some.
I'm just on this.
Oh, hang on. Sorry, Donald. There you go.
Sorry, there's some tech ideas and thoughts at itsforministry.org and the Facebook group there. Thank you.
Thanks, Donald. It was just, we really did think that the comments about the remote and things were really important, remote and virtual. And if folks are wanting to see the that chocolate nativity, it was such fun to do. It really was. We did it last year. It cost an absolute fortune in sweeties and biscuits and things, but we had about 50 different things in a box, and it was just so much fun to do. We've got there's a video of it somewhere on our church website. I think it's on my Facebook as well, but it was great fun to do, and it would be really interesting to be able to do it as a video that you can do kind of online as well for folks. Folks, there have been some tremendous ideas. Jonathan.
I was going to say, sorry, but just before we wind up, I wondered perhaps, if it was maybe worth, Wendy, if you're still there and we're happy to perhaps come back in, is there anything that you have gleaned from your time in the rooms that has maybe been of inspiration and of help to you, or is there anything that you'd like to share with us before we bring things to a close?
Oh, thank you, Jonathan. That's really kind. Thank you for having me along. For me, it's just so helpful to be this close to the reality that you're all, obviously it's only a glimpse of the reality of what you're all facing. So it's felt like a real privilege actually just to listen in and just to hear all the creativity and that heart to connect with the community at a time when people are going to need this moment to do something different for them this year. So thank you. Yeah, and yeah, I just wish I could listen in on your Lent Easter conversation when that happens. We can have that next week. That'd be brilliant. If you're, I'll be quick, but I'd be very happy to share just a closing piece to the Advent resources that we've done. Is that okay? It's just a short story. So this, the Advent activity and prayer sheet that we've created has 4 weeks of activities and the candle lighting prayer. And then there's another part to it as well. I'll put the link to the Christian Aid resources in the chat, so hopefully that'll get to you. But this is the last week of the activities, and we've encouraged people to think of all the things that love does. During Advent, we await the love that came into the world that first Christmas, the hope of the world wrapped up in swaddling bands and lying in a tiny infant in a manger. And we offer people the opportunity to compare their list of things or their poster of what love does with this poem it's an adaptation done by Ruth Burgess, who I know writes for Spill the Beans as well. But she adapted a poem that she already had for us. And it's called Love. Love grows, love cares, love sings, love cries, love acts, love waits, love wonders, love does. Love takes risks, love asks questions, love tells stories. Love stands up for justice. Love makes you vulnerable. Love listens. Love does. Love builds hope. Love builds respect. Love builds bridges. Love builds courage. Love builds community. Love keeps on giving. Love does. Love beckons, love challenges, love weeps, love dances, love changes lives, love dares, love lasts, love does. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you. Elizabeth is going to finish in prayer, which is fabulous. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. That was always energising, hearing all sorts of different ideas. And I've already ordered my inflatable nativity. So as you go off into the day, whatever it has, just go in strength. As we go, we remember that God is with us, Emmanuel, who brings peace into restless minds, hope into dark places, joy into sad hearts, and floods love throughout the world. So we go in strength, for we have the promise, God is with us, Emmanuel. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, folks,
Thank you. And as one person sent me a message, feel liberated in what you can do and what you can lay down, and think about it for your own context, and keep sharing ideas. Let the forum be that ideas forum as well, which is always where it is best. Okay, have a good day, everyone.